Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to having Steve Kahan. Steve, it's great to connect with you. Thanks for being on the show. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about your book, High Velocity Digital Marketing, but also talking to you about how you've successfully grown 7 startup companies from early stage to going public and even being sold, resulting in $5 billion in shareholder value. So sometimes that can be maybe to a listener, the people who listen to this show are solopreneurs to Fortune, company business people ranging from the C-level to the manager to the salesperson. So let's just kind of rewind that for a minute. What are some of the fundamentals that startups need to do today in the world of VR and AI, where things are moving very, very fast? What are some of the things from your guidance that startups need to be thinking in order to even move towards that type of valuation that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, for sure. So I read a McKinsey survey that was done just a short while ago, where they said that 83% of business CEOs, this is businesses of all sizes, expect that their marketing is going to drive the majority of their company's growth, but those same executives are not satisfied with the return on their marketing investments. And so in many cases, they're overwhelmed by revenue expectations that they can't meet. And basically, what I have done is to study that question. And fundamentally, the way people buy today has totally changed, right? Think about it. If you were going to go buy a car, you're not going to go to 10 different car dealerships. Most likely, you're going to get online. You're going to go to Google. You're going to price out the car. You might build it. You will read reviews, right? So buyers now rely on digital content to make purchase decisions. So you've got to be great online.
Yeah. So let's talk about how to be great, right? So there's okay, there's good, there's really good, and then there's great. And as a business coach, Steve, some of the things I see are you have 7 seconds to make a first impression. Your message needs to be tight. You need to get your message across very, very quickly. You need to make it easy for people. So define kind of from your lens, what's great.
Great is when you have at least 5% of your visitors are converting to leads on your website. And think about what that means for just a moment. If you're growing web traffic month in and month out, if you're like me, probably the last thing you want to do is put your name, address, phone number on a form online, right? Because you know you're going to get hounded, right? And so what you've got to have is content that is so compelling that at least 5% of your website's visitors will actually provide that information, which is a sales opportunity. And so you've got to have great content that captures the imagination of your target buyer.
Yeah. And let's talk about content, right? So content, Think Community, you've been listening for a while. You know, we talk a lot about content. I look at my business, Steve, like I'm a media company. So my content is updated every day on my website. And I always encourage people on this podcast and clients that I talk to really think of themselves as a media company. So you want to hit all the senses, the blogs, the videos, the tips, the quick tips, the longer version tips, the podcast, the videos, the audio. So kind of talk about maybe content and cadence.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find for most organizations is if you just look at a buyer's journey, and at the top, they're doing some education. So they're in a discovery mode. Then they might start considering various solutions. They'll evaluate one or two, and then they'll buy. Is that if you have a gap in content in any one of those phases, nothing will zap the velocity out of a high velocity model than a gap in content. And what you need to be able to do is to map your content against each phase in the buyer journey to make sure that you actually have that content, but also open up the aperture for what great content is. And I can give you an example.
Yeah, please.
So we were the last company that I worked for was a cybersecurity company. And we knew that our target buyer really had no idea how many privileged passwords that they actually needed to manage and secure. And these are the passwords across the infrastructure, operating systems, databases, applications. So if a bad person gets a hold of them, they have the keys to the kingdom. And so basically what we did was we had a paid for product that would discover those passwords. And we decided to give away that product that would do the discovery for free so that our buyers would get a beautiful report. They would see what passwords they would have. We would tell them about the risks and then even tell them how to fix it should they choose to do that manually. And just giving away some of that content that we had previously charged for, it flew off the shelves because it offered real value. Or we had what we call the privileged password risk assessment, where someone would come to our website, answer a series of questions, and then they would get what they really want, which is immediate feedback, a grade, A through F, like they're in university. Are they doing well? Are they not doing well? A beautiful report immediately that would tell them the various aspects of where they stood in terms of those responses and how to get better. But then we took it to the next level because we collected things like the geography, the industry, the size of the business. We could follow up the very next day with an email that then gave them this great report that showed them how they compared versus their peers, which is what everybody wants to know, right? And so when you produce great content, what you can find is it will help you to move buyers across that buyer's journey, that you will be getting, as I mentioned, at least a 5% website visitor to lead conversion rate. If you train your salespeople, then they could follow up in a consultative way on all of your content so that they're not just pushy sales reps. They're pushy sales reps and saying, gee, tell me what grade did you get? Where did you do well? Where didn't you do well? Would you be interested on how we can help you? And that sort of follow-up would change the dynamic of the relationship. And this content had a long shelf life, generated a ton of leads, but also fed our social media, our podcasts, our webinars, because we had proprietary information and something interesting and unique to communicate.
Yeah,
Well,
I
when you
love.
have great content, it does all of that.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. A couple of things. Think community. As you're hearing this, you've heard me say a lot of times. I talk a lot about Steve's shelf life. You know how long the shelf life is of a buyer, of a client, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you're talking long shelf life, I just want to kind of extract how important that is to really understand what the shelf life of everything that we're doing is, but also the fact that you can then repurpose when the content is such quality and unique. It really gives you, because I think a lot of times people think, well, how am I going to do it all? But when you have great content like you're talking about, it's easier to repurpose. So it's not as time consuming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's like one of the company that bought us for that $1.4 billion is now a company called Delinea. And they still on their homepage, 5.5 years later, after I originally created what we call a PAM for Dummies book or an expert's guide to PAM, they still have that on their homepage. So
Yeah.
when you have content that's great, sure, you've got to keep it fresh, but it will work for you for years. And it may seem old to you, but it isn't old to the many, many potential buyers that you have.
Yeah, very new. And when your new buyer, when the new buyer on the buyer's journey comes along, I love it. Steve, let's back up a minute. You know, you are an author. We talked right before you came online. You just finished a murder mystery book, and you know you're writing these amazing books. But rewind and just kind of let's talk mentorship, and just kind of take me back, if you know, as far as you want to go back to a mentor that kind of planted a seed that you can look back today and say, hey, that person really kind of, you know, inspired me to kind of do what I'm doing today?
Yeah, there was a CEO that I had the wonderful opportunity to work for early in my career who created the type of culture at a company where it was just extended family, where everybody was treated in that way. When there were events, it was always including your family. It was commonplace in conversations because it started at the top to use the words please, thank you. You treated others with great respect. And I guess the biggest testament to that mentor that I had that really not one single day felt like work for a company that I worked at for over 5 years. But a testament to what I learned from that mentor is essentially is this: 15 years later, after the company had a successful exit, most, I would say 85% of the employees still go to annual reunion parties. And all we could do is reminisce how awesome it was to be part of something so special. And we created bonds for life. That started, and that type of, I guess, culture, that atmosphere, that way of thinking about the people that you work with really came from that mentor, Doug Irwin.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's great. Well, kudos to Doug. I think that sounds incredible. What's one piece of advice that you would give? Maybe something that maybe you and or Doug would give someone today who's graduating college. Right as we record this, it's January 16th, 2023. We're seeing entrepreneurial clubs and groups, and you can major in entrepreneurship, and we're seeing a lot of people who are coming out of college really, really bright, understanding technology. And I think we're going to see a lot of startups over the next 5 years. What's the first piece of advice you'd give them, Steve?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, causing disruption is hard work, and that they're realizing that there's no substitute for rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, and no great accomplishments or achievements are possible or sustained without hard work. And it's the price you'll pay for the success that you desire to achieve. And so make no mistake, it's going to be about hard work, but at the same time, it's about learning how to protect your calendar such that you're able to have a good work-life harmony, that when you're busting your tail at work, you're still able to go to kids' games or work out or take some time to think strategically. Learn how to protect your calendar, block off time for yourself so that when you're working super hard, that you still give time to things in your life that are very important.
Yeah. I talk a lot about time management and mastering your calendar, protecting it, time blocking. I talk a lot about that with my clients. I do a keynote that companies have me fly all over the country and basically do this 4-hour training on exactly that. It's so important. What amazes me, Steve, is how many people do not use their calendar, I would say, properly or at all, and keep everything in their head. I always think of a calendar as kind of an extension of your brain. But one of the things I do is I ask people to show me their calendars at my training, and no one's using it, maybe with maybe one thing in their calendar. So think community, you've heard me talk a ton about attention management and time management and how we master our calendar. What Steve is talking about is so the just the bedrock of everything that stands for is so true. Let's do a quick speed round, Steve. A book that's had a big impact on you and why?
Winning by Jack Welch, because he taught me that
Yeah,
nothing matters more to winning than surrounding yourself with A-plus talent.
yeah, that's a great one. One key thing that people are going to get from your book, High Velocity Digital Marketing.
They will learn how to become great online in order to accelerate revenue growth.
And the best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
When you're going to choose a startup, approach that decision as an investor.
Yeah, it's a good one. Tell everybody how they can connect with you, learn more about you, buy your book, etc.
You could buy my book, High Velocity Digital Marketing, wherever books are sold online. And you could find me at my website, which is beastartupsuperstar.com.
I love it. Steve, this was great. Think community. I'm a business coach. I work with people to get who are successful and stuck to get them unstuck. I love this podcast because I get to have guests on the show like Steve that can connect into my mission to help you get unstuck. You shared a ton of stuff, Steve, today that I thought was priceless. I want to extract a couple things. One thing in particular, Think community, that in the buyer's journey, pay attention to the educating, considering, evaluating, and buying flow of each, and how your content matches up to each of those to guide the buyer consistently along. Because like Steve was saying, one gap can ruin the flow, and they all compound on each piece of what Steve's talking about compound on one another. And the only way to stop anything from compounding is to stop. Steve, this was great. I really appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you one more time, and any last thoughts?
At my website at beastartupsuperstar.com. And what I would just say in parting is that it is possible to become great on Google without reading a 500-page book. I'll explain it easily and in plain language in my book.
I love it. I love it. All right. Check out Steve's book. You can all download my book, The Think Big Movement, at jondwoskin.com. You can also learn a little bit more, anything you need to know about my stuff and this podcast, and tons and tons of content. Steve, this is great. Thank you very much. The community, thank you. Steve, have an awesome rest of the day.
You too, John. Thanks for having me.